Retro.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, voice of Hera and Rook Cast, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continually unexpected.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And it's Monday, start of a new week. So that means we're going to be discussing Clone Wars in this episode of the podcast. But before we get into that, Jay, remind everybody where our social media contacts are.
Absolutely. We are very conveniently found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
Okay, the dish is aligned, the signal is boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, and we're now broadcasting to the galaxy. So, like I was saying a moment ago, it's Monday, and that means we are continuing our Clone Wars rewatch series. We are on episode 13 of season 2, which is called Voyage of Temptation. Sounds very much like reality show set on a cruise ship type of thing. But here we go. You want to go ahead and give us the summary of this episode, please, Jay?
Sure thing. Duchess Satine of Mandalore is traveling to Coruscant to address her world's neutrality and the rumors of a growing army with the Republic. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and a squad of clones are assigned to her ship as protection against her wishes. Little does Satine know, but Death Watch and the Separatists have placed assassin droids on her ship. The Jedi and the clones thwart the plot to kill Satine and discover that one of the senators aboard her ship was a traitor before Satine is safely delivered to Coruscant.
So I'm going to ask you about your overall thoughts here in just a second, but before I do, I just had to share that I was watching this yesterday on my couch, in preparation for us talking about it, and my boys came downstairs in the middle of my rewatch, and they just got like transfixed watching this thing. It was so cool just watching them, especially with the end when Anakin does what he does, and just like, oh yeah. And so it's I forgot how much I like this episode. It's a really, really good episode it works on so many different levels. And but when you think of the Clone Wars, you think of so many different things, and yeah, Obi-Wan and Satine is one of them, but for some reason this is not the episode that comes to mind. I think the one what comes to mind for Obi-Wan and Satine is where unfortunately she perishes a lot of times for me, because Darth Maul's involved with that. But this was a very creative episode that evoked a lot of different genres and things. But enough of me babbling. What were your overall thoughts about this one?
No, I love the babbling. Absolutely. And ironically, when I was sitting down to watch this, my son Colby-Wan came down as well. And he, again, he just sort of sat down on the couch and he goes, this is such good television. Like he was just, and I don't know if he said exactly that, but just the storytelling and just like, he's like, Clone Wars is just so good. And it's true. And we oftentimes, not that we take it for granted necessarily, but it's revisiting episodes like this that truly do remind us how great it actually is. But this is actually one of the episodes for me that, and you and I talked about this actually last week when we recorded, that when I used to blog for Coffee with Kenobi, I had written a kind of a compare and contrast between Obi-Wan and Satine, and then Anakin and Padmé, or Padakin. I don't know if that's the ship name or not, but the way that their relationships aligned and sort of the Venn diagram of the two of them, and just all the implications of what this sets up in terms of Jedi attachment. And then also what's going on within the greater scope of the galaxy in terms of all of the espionage and the way that, the Separatists and the Republic are pitted against one another, and all of these underhanded kinds of assassin things that are going on, and how people are aligned with each other. And it just does such a great job with all of that. And there's a few other things, especially with Anakin's character, that as we talk a little bit more about this episode, that I had a little bit of a revelation about. And so I'm eager to talk about that with you as well. But of course, this is among some of my favorite Clone Wars that's out there. So I rate it very, very high.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things we get in this episode is the backstory to why Obi-Wan and Satine have some feelings towards each other. And it is it's kind of funny because with, we were comparing in our last Clone Wars discussion, their relationship and the banter with that of Han and Leia. And I think I
Mhm.
made the comment here that their banter is only second to that of Han and Leia here. And it's because they're, but it's for a very similar reason. There was these um, feelings that Leia wasn't able to act upon when it came to Han when in that relationship. And then, he's also the gruff scoundrel. She's the politician. They come from different worlds. They have different ways of seeing things. They're both very stubborn, alpha type personalities. Similar thing here. Obi-Wan and Satine. They come from different worlds. They have alpha type personalities. They have feelings for each other. They can't act on them here, right? But we do get that history about how back in his youth, when he was still a Padawan to Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan was on the run with Satine, protecting her. They were living hand to mouth, and then they kind of developed a spark between them. But when they got them back to Mandalore, they, after a civil war, so you get some undeveloped history in this one line here. She had to begin the rebuilding process of the planet, and he had to honor his vows and took a posting, or he was assigned, I should say, to someplace else. And so, yeah, just kind of, I like the way they worked it in here. Anakin asks about this, Obi-Wan talks about it a little bit, but it's not like they give us this gigantic exposition dump. And one of the things that Star Wars does so well, it's like, I'm thinking back to Leia's message to Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, like, you served my father during the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars? What are those? Oh, we'll find out.
Right. Oh
And
my
like,
gosh. Yeah.
in 30 years, or 20 years, we'll find out about the Clone Wars. And in this situation is like, they returned to Mandalore after Civil War. Well, what was that? You know, a similar type of a thing. They just drop these nuggets in the dialogue, and they don't make us sit there and listen to a lecture about what all this stuff is. They just, just enough to intrigue us going forward.
Right, absolutely. And and as you were saying about this mission that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were on to protect Satine, and how Obi-Wan and Satine were thrown together very similarly to how Anakin and Padme were thrown together, where Anakin was watching out for Padme on Naboo. Likewise, Obi-Wan was watching out for Satine, and then they were drawn together at that time. And
Mhm.
he was even talking about, and again, these great ways of working it in, that they were living hand to mouth, they were outrunning bounty hunters, all of these different things, and you don't need a huge exposition on it. But it's just, for me too, I was so, I don't know if taken aback is necessarily the way I want to put it, but I was a little surprised at how open Obi-Wan was with Anakin about everything that happened.
Yeah,
And, like, he had absolutely nothing to hide. He was just kind of, yeah, this is what happened. And, we had feelings for each other and we put them aside.
right. And one of the things you mentioned you want to talk about was about, kind of the comparison and contrast between Obi-Wan and Satine, on the one hand, and Anakin and Padme on the other. Anakin is all over this relationship.
Oh,
He
yeah.
is so interested in Obi-Wan having a girlfriend. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One, Obi-Wan's his brother. He wants Obi-Wan to be happy. And if there's someone like that that would make Obi-Wan happy, Anakin's perspective is you should pursue that. But two is the more selfish reason, which is, he's married to Padme at this point. And if Obi-Wan has got these feelings, if Obi-Wan's in this type of a situation, he might understand what it is that Anakin's going through. It might give him an opportunity. It's none of this is said during the episode, but Anakin does. I don't want to necessarily call it a selfish motive, but there is a motive beyond, him caring for a quote unquote brother here for him to encourage this type of a relationship.
Oh yeah, I mean it's kind of a kindred spirit sort of a thing. And I think for Anakin too, he realizes that he's not that I think that Anakin thought he was ever flawed as a Jedi for having attachment to Padme or having love for Padme, but at least looking up to somebody like Obi-Wan, he could say, "Oh, okay. Yeah, he's gone through the same thing that I have." I think it's really cool that we can sort of bond over this sort of thing, and I can tease him about it also
Yeah, speaking
to
of the
boot.
teasing, at one point where he tells, "You go save your girlfriend," and Obi-Wan's like, "Yeah, right," and then he turns around, and is like, "Wait a minute,
She's
Anakin,
not
she's not
my
my
girlfriend.
girlfriend." But the other
Yep.
thing that's cool is that again, getting into the poetry aspect of Star Wars is that they're on this ship, the Coronet, which I did a little digging is apparently the same created by the same manufacturer that created Dryden Voss's starship in
That
Solo.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Yep, that makes
this
sense.
very vertical type of a tower type of a ship, but they're all custom built off of the same model. So while it's not identical, it's based off the same structure there. But at any rate, they're going up that elevator, and Anakin senses Obi-Wan's anxiety, which is the flip of when they're in Padme's apartment building at the beginning of Attack of the Clones, and
Yes.
Obi-Wan's sensing Anakin's anxiety before they meet with Padme here. And so that was just a nice touch. It was very subtle. They don't draw a whole lot of attention here to it. But, while we're making the comparison, you know, that had to be on Anakin's mind, that Obi-Wan was able to always kind of sense what he was going through with Padme here. And now this is familiar. It's his first inkling that there's even a thing going on at the moment.
Yep, it's a nice little, as we say, poetry, Star
Mhm.
Wars always rhymes kind of thing for sure. And again, I think that it deepened their relationship between apprentice and or Padawan, or he's not really his Padawan anymore, but the relationship that Anakin and Obi-Wan had. And it's just unfortunate that that didn't carry over in the future.
Mhm.
And, to the same point too, this is one thing about I was saying earlier with the observation that I had with Anakin and a little revelation is he seems in a lot of ways so much more mature in his portrayal and his characterization in the Clone Wars as than he does even in Revenge of the Sith, which I
Mhm.
realize it's a very different, window of time, and it's a very different set of circumstances and a different story that needs to be told. But I don't know. I just feel like Anakin seems to be more mature in a lot of ways. What do you think?
I That's a good question. Does he seem more mature? Well, maybe more confident, I think, in this episode. He's not, as
Mhm.
you pointed out, he's not dealing with the pressure of knowing that his wife is pregnant. He's not dealing with the visions that Padme's going to die in childbirth. He's he does something. We're going to get to this in just a second. So, he kills Senator Merrick at the end of this, and it's right when Merrick is giving this whole diatribe about, oh, Merrick has got he's got the bomb in his hand. He's got the trigger for the bomb that's going to blow up the ship, and someone's going to have to kill him. Is it going to be Satine, and then she's going to come off as a hypocrite because of her pacifist vows, or is it going to be Obi-Wan, and then he'll be proving himself to be the cold-blooded killer, the exact type of person that Satine rejects, and then Anakin stabs the guy through the back. And he's kind of like looking at them like, they kind of look at him dumbfounded. He's like, what? He was a bomber.
Blow up
I
the
took out the
ship.
bomber. Yeah, he's going to blow up the ship, and I took care of that here. And so, it was a neat little bit of foreshadowing for the type of person that Anakin becomes and what he's capable of in this case. But he's got some bravado in this episode when they're looking for the assassin droids or investigating what's going on in the lower decks where all the cargo is kept before the assassin droids gets out. He shows up as like, all right, man. He carries that with him in a way that we don't actually ever get to see him do in live action. Very much comes off like an adult in these moments, right?
Mhm.
And but then so there is that maturity element here. He's not having to react to any type of perceived slights, which is Revenge of the Sith is full of for him.
Right.
And
Right.
so he just kind of gets to be a Jedi Knight. He gets to be, he gets addressed as Master Skywalker at one point in this episode, even though he's not a Jedi Master. And he's carrying out a role. He's not worrying about Padme. in this moment. He's probably thinking about her, but it's only
Mhm.
because Obi-Wan's situation is so similar, as you pointed out.
Mhm. Yep, so true.
Yeah. So the assassin droids, this was kind of one of the fun parts of the featurette that accompanied this episode. I have been, as an aside, these past couple weeks, I've been watching a lot of movies like Predator, Terminator, and Alien with my sons because we had started this project back during COVID, showing the movies from the 80s and 90s and some television shows that they hadn't previously seen because we had all this time in our hand, but they were not quite ready for those type of movies yet. Well, they're both over the age of 17, so they can watch rated R material. I just loved how much there was this inspiration for Alien that went into these assassin droids. There's these droids that
Mhm.
kind of lurk around. They come out of the shadows. They make use of their environment and they attack people. And Dave Filoni even kind of cited that when he was talking about the development of the ship and these lower decks and the assassin droids here. But really clever. Again, I don't think we ever see this type of droid again in the Clone Wars anywhere.
Yeah.
Can you think of anything else, or is this the
No,
only
I
time?
can't, and they're so creepy with the little
Mhm.
baby spiders and everything, it's just ugh.
And so, yeah, and then they kill Red Eye, one of the clones, and then the assassin droid like sticks two of its pieces into his shoulders and kind of makes it look like he's walking so he can sneak up on Anakin. Of course, it doesn't
Yeah.
work, but that was clever and creative. There was a
Mhm.
lot of innovative stuff that went into this episode just around these assassin droids.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I wish we would have seen them more because it really is a cool design.
Hmm. Hmm. And that leads to the way, in the investigation, they're trying to figure out how these droids got on board because no one signed off on the manifest except for they realized that there's a Republic seal. The only people that could have done that is one of the senators. Well, there happens to be four on board. We got Orn Frita, Kinrob, who I cannot remember seeing anywhere prior to this episode, Anaconda Far, which Padmé refers to as, Uncle Anaconda, and then Tal Merrick, who is the senator from Mandalore. They did not cite this, and I didn't find any other references in my research. But did you ever watch much of the Star Trek original series?
I did.
Okay. You remember the Trouble with Tribbles episode?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
and the way that Kirk figures out who the Klingon is by the way that the Tribble reacts to them. They
Oh my
squeal, whatever.
gosh, yes.
Yeah,
Ding,
that's the
ding, ding,
vibe I got
ding.
here. Yeah,
Mhm.
when he captured one of the little mini assassin droids, they put it in the glass dish. He brings it out, it's like it's almost dessert. And then he's basically figured, well, this thing's not going to react to the person that programmed it. And sure enough, that's what happens. It's inside the inside the glass bowl, trying to get to Orn Frita, and then Kinrob and on kind of far. And then when it gets to Tal Merrick, does nothing here. But I don't know, that made me go a little bit because I was like, that seems very much like exactly what happened when William Shatner was like way overacting in that episode of the original series of Star Trek.
Good call. William Shatner overacting? No,
It can't be
never.
true.
Love
So
that.
yeah, yeah. And then what do you think about Tal Merrick here? He's this traitor from Mandalore.
Oh, yeah, he's just slimy, you know,
Mhm.
slimy and not satisfying as, we would see in Lion King. But, yeah, I mean, it's obviously he was put in there to be that kind of one that you look at and go, "Ooh, you just wanna squash him just like a bug," kind of thing. But
Yeah,
just unfortunate that Satine had him as part of her retinue and trusted him and everything else, but necessary evil, I guess, more than anything else.
right, right. Well, and I think it does a benefit to this episode because we know that there is this division that's happening on Mandalore. Satine has put into place this pacifist regime. They're not getting involved in war. She makes mention in this episode how she speaks for 1,500 systems, and they're
Mhm.
looking at her to preserve the neutrality and not get involved in this war. But the other side of this is that you've got Death Watch, who is rejecting this way. The history of Mandalore is a people of warriors. It's people of war when it comes down to it. And so you've got the senator who I think even goes beyond Death Watch's ideals, who's looking to profit off this entire thing. And, so he's the one that he's trying to get Satine out of the way. Part of me is to what end? Because like if she dies, what is the succession plan there as the ruler of Mandalore? Is does it open it up for someone else who is Death Watch to come in, or what the situation is? Of course we get more on that later in the series, but still, just it does kind of create the tension that we'll see in so many Mandalorian episodes to come in the series.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess the last element of this episode that I can think of that we haven't addressed yet is, well, I'm going to integrate some other stuff into it. That we get a lot of bickering between Obi-Wan and Satine in this. She's embracing her pacifist ways. She think the idea that Obi-Wan proposes that they fight to preserve the peace. For her, that's an oxymoron, right? I mean, you can't. That is abhorrent to her. You can't fight and then, much kind of like the Lerman says, this whole idea that
Oh yeah,
fighting for peace is means you have to kill for it. That doesn't make any sense. So I think those two would be kindred spirits in this. But at the same time, he's like, yeah, but you can't just like wish peace into place. And of all people, it's Orn Free Ta that interjects to kind of like preserve the peace between these two. But as we were just saying, it's kind of like this argument is really a cover for something else, and that is their frustration with each other that they can't be together.
right, right. And and I understand Satine's like where she is as far as being a pacifist because
Mm-hmm.
she dealt with all of this on Mandalore and her people were basically, taken out. And so she doesn't see the benefit of any type of fighting or violence. So if we take all of that away, we have pacifism, which
Mm-hmm.
can help preserve everything. But then she also has and I love that Obi-Wan said, "Oh, so you just happen to have a disruptor gun?" And she says, "Well, just because I'm a pacifist doesn't mean I won't defend myself."
Right.
Which I think is a good defining line in her values as far as how far is she actually willing to go. But I just thought it was so cool how as soon as those started to come after them, that it seemed like Obi-Wan and Satine just muscle memory back to back,
Yeah.
fighting with each other and just like they did when they were on their little mission. So I thought that was a nice little touch. But, in some ways that's, as I was saying last week too, her ideals are also her downfall. But I guess you can look at that in anyone, sometimes our ideals are our downfall, but it's being true to who we are. And I just also thought that the whole scene with Tal Merrick and he's got Satine hostage, and all of a sudden at first it took me aback for a second because she's all of a sudden professing her love for Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, is this I forgot if it was a tactic to just take Tal's mind off of what was going on as a distraction. But then all of a sudden, Obi-Wan's like, all right, fine. If you would have just said the word, I would have left the order. It's like he's just telling this guy this,
Yeah.
like not even holding anything back. So I said a lot of things there. I know, but
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said it because it kind of rounds up some stuff that I neglected to address. And I think, as I was mentioning earlier, one of the things that's going on is that there's an unresolved situation between Satine and Obi-Wan in this episode. And she resents that he left. And the thing is that these two are doing what Anakin and Padmé would not. They are honoring their commitments. Obi-Wan had taken a vow to the Jedi Order. He was not going to have an attachment. And he's confessing to Satine at the end of this episode, if you had said the word, I would have left the Jedi Order to be with you. And her position is not one that would require her to give up being the ruler of Mandalore, unlike Padmé. She tells Anakin. It's like, they were keeping the relationship secret because she knows that would have interfered with her duties to Naboo. Similarly, he could not be in a relationship with her and married to her and still be a Jedi in this situation. But Obi-Wan makes it clear. It's like she needed to express that desire. At the same time, it's unspoken, but she wanted him to make that choice
Right.
in this situation. And he didn't do it. He didn't bridge that gap. He didn't make that choice of his own accord. He was waiting for her to say as much. And so, there she is being held at gunpoint by a madman who's got a trigger to a bomb that's going to blow up the ship in his other hand. And, she doesn't know she's got it at the moment. And so she's not going to die with a regret, which is to tell Obi-Wan how she feels about him. And, they could be arguing about peace. They could be arguing about neutrality. They could be arguing about politics. It really was just a way for those two to bicker with each other. That's not to say they don't believe in the things they were talking about, but it was a proxy for the real issue, that they had these unresolved feelings for each other. Because what happens after this? Obi-Wan says, if you'd given the word, I would have left the order. And that's all she needed to hear when it was said and done. Because, when they're making their farewells, she kind of says, like, I can't remember what she says about his beard. And he's like, oh, I kind of like it. And she's like, yeah, it covers up too much of your handsome face.
Right.
In this situation. And it's just kind of like they had to get that out of there. It's just that, yes, we want to be together, but we have other responsibilities. We're honoring the responsibilities. We cannot do it. That doesn't mean I don't love you. And, but unlike Anakin, Obi-Wan, he is choosing, or he's not trying to have the cake and eat it too. We've been talking about this a lot over in recent months and stuff, but he knows it's like, I made a vow to the order and I'm going to honor it, or I am going to set it aside and go follow my heart's desire.
And he's completely open about that. Like I said, even down to, as you mentioned, that last scene when Satine just lovingly strokes his beard. There's so many people around that could have seen that, and they're not even trying to hide it. Right. So, it's like, okay, this is, we understand we have these feelings, but we're not going to do anything about it. And I'm not going to pursue this attachment. That's why it's so, these kind of narratives between Obi-Wan and Satine versus Anakin and Padme really do underscore the complexity of the whole stance on attachment. And I know we could go down a crazy rabbit hole on attachment, and we have before. So, I digress. But yeah, I'm often perplexed by the fact that Obi-Wan is just so open about it.
Yeah. Well, it's because he's not, although he loves Satine, I can't figure out how to say this. He does not have the attachment to her. And the reason I can say that is because when you do juxtapose him to Anakin is clearly attached to Padme here, right? I mean, it's he's doing, we just, we got an episode coming up into the Sith, and it covers his decision to join the Sith. And it is all about protecting her, all about saving her, his fear of loss for her. And, not to get ahead of ourselves with the Clone Wars, but we'll see Obi-Wan does not put his feelings for Satine ahead of his duty.
Right.
At great cost there. And I can't help but think that this should have been illustrative for Anakin about the choice he needed to make that he just refused to do in this case. And despite, Obi-Wan setting this type of an example, Anakin completely disregarded it with what, going forward.
And as we've said before too, Anakin's relationship or attachment with Padme was more possessive than it was anything else, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, there we go. There we have it. Really good episode. This probably talk about it for another 30 minutes, but we got a lot of minutes recorded for this week, so we're going to probably end it here. But thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of this episode of the Clone Wars, Voyage of Temptation, coming to reality series near you. But if you've enjoyed it and you want to follow along with the rest of our Clone Wars rewatch, then make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. We are available everywhere. You name it. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Amazon Music. We are on all those places, as well as other great podcatchers. So, and if we're not, let me know, and I'll see what it takes to get us on other outlets if someplace else you prefer to catch us. Once you've done all of that, we greatly appreciate your ratings and reviews on whatever podcatcher that you're using that support such things. Comments on YouTube are always fun to respond to. But those do help drive the algorithms that get the show in front of other people and help the show grow and other people find our brand of Star Wars discussion. So we appreciate your interaction with the show. And then head over to retrozapp.com. You can find the rest of the catalog, all previous 914 episodes of the show, as well as some other great shows on the network. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are one more time and the other places we have set up shop on the internet?
Sure. So while you're sitting on your dais surrounded by pillows and sipping on whatever wonderful drink that you have, like Satine, you can check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can also check out our Pinterest boards for all kinds of fun ideas for everything Star Wars. And we also have, as Dennis mentioned, our 2 YouTube outlets, which include both the traditional YouTube and YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out as well. And you can also hit us up on our TeePublic store, which has 7 different Podcast Stardust show logo designs available on everything from t-shirts and sweatshirts to coffee mugs, home goods, tote bags, and everything in between. And so once again, hit up that link in our show notes. And if you do happen to purchase something, please snap a picture and post it so we can see where it ends up out in the wild.
All right. We'll go ahead and remind everybody what you got going on in cosplay.
Sure. So on my Instagram, you can check out all of my Clone Wars and Rebels and Inquisitor cosplays from Ahsoka to Hera and everything in between, even Mandalorians, on j.snips cosplay on Instagram. And right now, a little quiet, but things will be amping up here towards the fall. So once again, j.snips cosplay on Instagram.
All right. Upcoming on the show on a Wednesday, we are getting into the next installment of our Revenge of the Sith series for its 20th anniversary. We just recorded that with a really great guest, so make sure you join us for that. Then on Friday, the current plan is to do some sort of a news episode, but Jay and I got stuff going on, so we'll see if that actually happens or if we'll be releasing something else. We recorded some content in advance to fill in some of the gaps while things are going on, but if some urgent news breaks, then I'll make sure that gets covered on the podcast. And we'll get back to our regular schedules soon enough. But thank you for bearing with us as we enjoy our summers as well, just like the rest of you. But with all that said, thanks for listening to episode 915 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.